everybody always says, how do you get them motivated year after year to come back and to be ready and hungry after they've experienced that success? And a lot of other sports, kids come back, they get a little fat on themselves, and they come back and they take some steps backwards. But every kid that's played there the last 23 years has won a championship. And so every 4-year class usually has at least 2 classes that have been to the championship experience. One of the 3 greatest things in life, besides getting married and, and having a first child, is going to the championship. Because in our game, and like no other sport, lacrosse, the championship weekend in college, is the pinnacle of lacrosse. It's not, the pro championship. That's the weekend. All eyes are on you in the lacrosse world. And when you go there, it's so special that if you have any eligibility left, you're dying to go back. And so we have that intangible that comes back with a group of guys that I would say, man, I'm going to do anything I can this summer to get better so I can get back there. And not only that, then they're driving their teammates that maybe don't know, hey, you're coming with me to the weight room today, that maybe is not happening as a whole. And so just for example, Nowazek and Tucker could have really gotten soft this summer. Sophomores, experienced all the success, championships, second-team All-Americans as sophomores out of the middle of nowhere. And then they come back this fall, and I asked it after one practice to Coach Sandlin, I said, Ben, those 2 guys are way better than they were last year. They're faster, a little bit bigger, they're a little stronger, their stick skills, that they had actually improved. So that's been a driving factor. I haven't had to say a lot. I always remind them about the 3 greatest things in life, but those guys that have been there, they're really pushing. And those guys that have been there also become like leaders, like captains. So you don't just have like your 3 captains. It's like, man, we got 30 guys back from last year, and they're all dying to go back. It's like you got 30 guys driving people a little bit harder than maybe, because other teams haven't had that intangible type of thing. So that's been a blessing in disguise as regard to our off-season training and, getting kids motivated to do that extra stuff that's going to develop their skill set. Well, key guys for us on offense this year, we obviously took a pretty big hit at the midfield. We lost 4 of our top 6 players, and we lost a first and second team All-American at midfield. So, but Brendan Bromwell returns from the first line, big lefty. I think he's ready for he was an All-American last year. I think he's ready for a midi of the year type of a season. Garrett Reynolds is going to move up from the second midfield line. Garrett had an outstanding season last year. As a second midfield liner, kind of unheard of. He scored 30 goals from the second midfield line and without playing on man up. So there's 2 guys right there that can definitely score. Corey Gwynn was on the third line as a sophomore. Is seizing his opportunity. That'll impose our first line. And then we virtually returned the entire attack. We returned Nate Bondino in the right-hand spot, scored over 100 points, and was second-team All-American. We returned Carson, who scored over 60 goals. Kalama on the crease, and he's been a two-time All-American. And then Nick Garbarino, who stepped in for Brady Shields and had 3 goals in a championship game and had an outstanding game. We returned the entire attack. Second midfield is, there's a lot of guys there, a lot of opportunities, a lot of good athletes, but at this point it's a crapshoot probably between 10 guys still after fall ball. But the good news is there's probably 10 guys to choose from that could be more than adequate players that are extremely athletic there. Well, defensively, at the defensive end, you're always excited when coach when you're returning the MVP of the championship game, the goal, who had an outstanding game, and who I think, if Colin hadn't missed the first 10 games last year with an injury, that he definitely would have been an All-American goalie as he showed on that stage on that day. And he had a great fall, so we're real excited that he's back there to lead us in his senior year. We returned the starting whole group of Will Nowazek, who was second-team All-American and last year, and defense, and Kyle Tucker was a second-team All-American, 2 really athletic kids, big athletic kids. And then Aaron Leeds, who's a senior, who started also last year and had a great championship game. We return Andrew Turnahan at long stick, who was third-team All-American. And we've added a really nice piece to the puzzle, a local kid who came back home, a kid named Corey Berry, that's another outstanding pole that really has some takeaway abilities that I don't think we've had in quite a while. He can get the ball on the ground. A lot of new guys at D-Midi, had 4-year starters and Dabbs and Anderson, who were just tremendous players. The one position I was really worried about was that, but after fall ball, I'm not worried about that as much as I am maybe the second midfield. Troy Miller's a junior, really stepped up, really fast kid. A freshman, Jared Walls from LaSalle High School, was coached by Tony Resch, world team coach. He's really well coached, a great athlete, really fast. And then 2 other kids, Parker Parker Stevenson, and a transfer from Hofstra, Jeremiah Leclerc. We have 4 guys that are athletes in that position. So the D-Midi wise, we're not going to be quite as good as last year, but there isn't going to be the drop off in most cases when you started 2 guys for 4 years. Well, we've had some success, obviously, and we've been able to attract some good players. But from day one, it's always been my philosophy in life that players are made, they're not born. And you got to really work hard. And we've always just had a good culture of guys that maybe there's a little bit more wall balls occurring by a greater number. Maybe there's a little bit more shooting going by a greater number. And in general, most kids see our team play and they say, "Your guys are a lot bigger than everybody else, coach. You recruit all these big guys." I said, "No, they got big when they got here because they bought into the weight room, and then there's been those guys ahead of them that maybe had that success, and they see that, and then that motivates them. So there's like trickle-down effect of being successful that keeps people going, and in most cases, kids got to buy their time a little bit if it's a good program. You're not coming in and being a superstar, as a freshman, and you got to work real hard. And sometimes when you're not winning, guys aren't working as hard. But when you see those guys winning championships, you're not playing quite as much. You know that, hey, that's how they got it done, and I think that's helped a lot of our guys, so that when we move on and we lose 4 guys or whatever, and the next guy is, "Hey, Dab still got eligibility? Where's that guy?" "Oh no, that's the new number 8. He just happened to have been waiting a little bit longer, and he knew his opportunity was coming, and he drove himself to develop to that point." Well, last year's team, we were just a really well-distributed team. We didn't really have any weaknesses. We were solid on attack. When teams shut down our attack, we were both midfields were very good last year. Usually you have one really good midfield, then the midfield that buys you some time. Second line scored a lot of goals. One kid scored 30, and we actually were faster than the first line. So, and we were obviously very good at D-Midi. We were just a consistent team across the board. I don't think there was any superstars. Preston was a special D-Midi for sure, but just a lot of really good guys and that played well together and were extremely unselfish. In some past teams, maybe we've had a star that gave everybody else a step. The Bradmans, the Berkmans, and some of the other great Kaufmans. That gave everybody else a step, and you definitely knew who they were. I don't know if we had that guy last year. When you watched us play, "Oh yeah, Blondino was great today. Kalama was great today. Brimwell was great today." It was a lot of guys that could do it. So I think that was maybe a little bit different than maybe some of the past teams that really had some true stars. We just had a lot of good guys that played well and stepped up for each other.